The skull is large enough to fit as a helmet over the average man's head. The skeleton was one of several found buried in the form of a whale. One of the arguments is that these are all hoaxes and mastodon bones and things like that. And I say, no, there's a mystery here. These are all virtually from Native American burial mounds that weren't touched for thousands of years. Wrote about an 8-foot giant with the skull as big as a peck basket in his town history. Several skeletons over 7 foot tall, 7,070 years old. They had red ochre on them. This is one of the most interesting stories about giants in Mexico. First of all, I studied economics at the University of Massachusetts. And I'm a stonemason by trade. My brother and I own a stonemasons company in Ashfield. And I've always been interested in history, archaeology, anthropology, politics. I'm fascinated with all the sciences. And my brother and I, for about 15 years, studied the misdeeds of the NSA and the CIA, interviewing people, reading redacted documents, talking to professors, and putting together a really disturbing story of what our intelligence agencies have done in the past with political assassinations and drug running and things that really seem almost conspiratorial but are true. And then I came to the point where several other reporters and researchers were killed in the line of researching the things that we were, and I felt like Maximus in Gladiator, and I just wanted to go home to my gardens and stone walls and just to leave it all behind, because I figured the truth would come out and I didn't want to end up in a dumpster dead somewhere. And luckily, Bradley Manning, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, and other researchers came out with all this information that we were starting to get into about the misdeeds of the NSA. I say that because somebody who really grabs a subject and digs into it and tries to figure it out objectively, like what is going on here. And through the course of studying old historical texts to see if there were accounts of colonial settlers finding Native American stonework or pre-existing stonework, I started to find many examples that the colonials talked about. But I also started to accumulate all these strange accounts of giant skeletons, which I will talk about. And I just want to say, I ask for an open mind. I'm not going to try to convince you of anything, but look at the evidence and see if it makes sense to you that there is a story here that's worth investigating. So Hugh and I have met, we met like 5-6 years ago, and we collaborated on a television show. It's my brother and I, looking pretty tough. This is my office in Ashfield, the Daily Giant. It's a play on words. And we did a show for history, investigating these accounts. It was ginned up, I understand, but the bottom line is we wanted to see if there was veracity to these accounts. So this is episode 3. We're in Rockingham, Vermont. There's Hugh right there. And this is some of the stonework we've done around town. I'm really rebuilding all the old stone walls on Bug Hill Road. We built towers. There's 3 towers here, all around Ashfield, except my friend Walter's. And we did this in Monadnock. It's a fountain we did at Cooper's Corner. And this is over the Franklin Land Trust we did last summer. So this is some of the stonework we do. So I'm acquainted with stone. I've become a stone whisperer. And so through the act of investigating Native American civilizations, earthen mounds, geometric forms, Native American stonework around the country, I encountered the mound builders, which I knew very little of from studying in school. And it was really disconcerting that such an amazing civilization was so little known about. And part of it is the manifest destiny, the marginalization of Native American civilizations to steal their land, to portray them as savage and disorganized, and all those lies that imperialists use. So I stumbled across the enormous and incredible work that the mound builders did. Now, the mound builders were comprised of Native American civilizations that started about 3400 BC. There were the Adena people, the Hopewell people, and the Mississippian people, ending up in about AD 1600, that built enormous forms of earth and stone tombs and incredible works. This is Watson Brake. 3400 BC was the beginning of the mound building culture. That's quite an ancient date. And right here you see the mound complex that was built. Now this is what I was talking about, the mound builders, the Mississippian, Hopewell, and Adena. This vast area was filled with over 100,000 earthen mounds, geometric forms, incredible and precise engineering accomplishments for thousands of years. And we know little about these civilizations, unfortunately. In 1500 BC, on the Arkansas River in Louisiana, Poverty Point was built. The earthen embankments here would fill the Great Pyramid 36 times. Over 10,000 people lived here. The bird effigy was the focus of the site. It was 72 feet high, 600 feet long, and 700 feet wide. Just amazing accomplishment. And here's an aerial satellite from 1938 of the site. And all around the eastern part of the country, we have these incredible mounds that are 60, 70, 100 foot high. This is Aztalan in Wisconsin, a Mississippian site. Aerial view. This is Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia, 68 feet high. Unearthed in the middle here was a female skeleton, 7.5 foot tall. Recorded that the jawbone could fit over the face, and an 8-foot male was buried with thousands of shells and pearls. This is Saul's Mound in Tennessee. We went to the site. It's the Pinson site. This is the focal point of a 1,000-acre medicine wheel of earthen forms that our friend Greg Little, author and researcher, identified. These sites had astronomical alignments, and Hugh has been all around the world millions of times to all these sites, and together, we've worked with Native Americans and other researchers to conclude that these sites weren't just burial mounds. They were used as ancient earth machines, like tools of enlightenment, like the Great Pyramids or Teotihuacan. They've been misrepresented as just ancient tombs. There's a 100-foot high earthen pyramid in Illinois, Collinsville, called Cahokia. So this is a 14-acre base that's 1 acre larger than the Great Pyramid in Egypt, a 100-foot high step pyramid. And I knew nothing about this construction when I grew up, and I was astounded to learn about it. And this is a recreation. It almost has a Mesoamerican feel, and some researchers think there was trade back and forth between the two cultures. And here it is right here, and they had an astronomically aligned wood henge also. And it looks like, this almost looks like Teotihuacan. It's just this amazing, they use the available material, which was earth, to create what often looks like Mesoamerican pyramids. Here's the Great Serpent Mound here, originally dated to 1100 AD by the Fort Ancient people. It is looked at by the Hopis as over 5,000 years old, that the serpent represents the trail, the adventure that the Hopi ancestors took across the country to build that. There's a lot of controversy around this, but it is an amazing accomplishment. And it is a predictor of eclipses. It shows the solstices and the equinoxes, a really amazing engineering feat. And here is what I find most interesting. These geometric forms, 1,500 of them in Ohio alone. This one is in Newark, and from Earlham University, 2 researchers figured out that it understood and predicted eclipses. Basically, how do I express this? It was like an ancient computer that understood the 18.61 metonic cycle of the moon. It's a really sophisticated geometric form, and you find them everywhere. And Chillicothe has a similar octagon and circle that predicts eclipses, and this was thought to be the Great Hopewell Road, a 55-mile long ceremonial walkway with earthen walls on each side, 189 foot wide. And Native Americans would go here, I think in the summer months, to get a better view of the moon. So this incredible trade network and sharing of culture happened in ancient America. Here's the octagon and the circle from the air. And these geometric forms are everywhere. We never knew about these. It's like a geometry blackboard in college or something, and they were on the earth. I mean, they were laid out on the ground. So I studied the mound builders. I studied ancient stonework built by Native Americans in the country. Then I started to uncover these strange accounts embedded obscurely in town and county histories, and I found that really compelling. The first account I ever found of a giant skeleton was by this man, George Sheldon, former state senator, amateur archaeologist. He reports in the history of Deerfield that they found a skeleton, and one of these was described by Henry Mather as being of monstrous size. The head is big as a peck basket with double teeth all around. It was examined by Stephen Williams. He taught anatomy at Berkshire College. The owner must have been nearly 8 feet high. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I talked to my brother about it, and he said, you know, he encouraged me to write about an article to say, you know, we know George Sheldon, we know he founded museums in Deerfield, he's an esteemed historian. What does this mean? So I dug into more texts. I read through thousands of pages of town and county histories, and I found similar findings. Morrill Robertson and others examined the skeleton. 7'8", double row of teeth in each jaw. That's something that's interesting you find in many of these. History of Rockingham, we covered this in the show. This was a known, enormous Native American chief named Philip, and when he died, they put him in a secret spot with a stone on top of him, but when they dug up the railway, the Cheshire Railway in the 1850s, they found him. And they talk about right here, double rows of teeth, and the jawbone could fit over the face, so that is unimaginably large. And in the show, we investigated this. Lyman Simpson Hayes was the historian who wrote about it. And we went through his records, and he talks about, right here, he talks about that the teeth were all double and perfect. He goes out of his way to insert that before the final edition of the town history. So we found this in his notes, really making that point of double rows of teeth. Martha's Vineyard, same thing, 7 feet. An unusual feature, the going out of the way to point this out, was a complete double row of teeth in both the upper and lower jaws. We investigated this in the show because there was a box under the corner of this church, the Baptist church, that they put a jawbone with double rows of teeth. And we're like, yes, let's go dig it up. We get there, and it's a used car lot, and they paved over it and destroyed the church. So that was a bummer. And I started to find these accounts 7 foot and taller all over New England by respected doctors and archaeologists of the time, and all around the country. You know, over and over again, we've accumulated with a series of researchers we work with over 1,000 accounts of 7 foot and taller skeletons. Now, these are stationary objects. It's not like the skeleton's getting up and moving around. You have specific measurements, and you know, we found hoaxes, exaggerations, mismeasurements, but the honest truth is that a lot of these just stand the test of time. There's double rows of teeth, which is such an odd thing. You find it here. In Scientific America, some wonderful skulls are reported having been found on the islands of Catalina with double teeth all the way around. And you look at historical accounts and you find, this is Flavius Josephus. In Hebron, there were till then left the race of giants who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike to any credible relations of other men. And he was a well-known chronicler. The great chroniclers of the time, all the explorers that we know, they all report either encountering giant bones or giant people. It's a really strange thing. This Professor Chris Combs wrote this. I talked to him, and this account was in his book, The Giants of Wales, and there are so many of these accounts of living giants. 9 feet 9 inches was the giant of Gabara. This is really interesting. In the time of Hadrian the Emperor, there was raised from the earth in a place called Messana in Carthage, the body of the giant called Ida, who was 20 feet in length. I know that's a freak show, but look, and who had double sets of teeth or 2 rows of teeth still standing completely preserved in his head or in his gums. That really, once again, they're going out of the way with this strange historical report from 200 AD to point that anatomic anomaly out. It's a really compelling thing. So I went back to the museum and I talked to the curator in Deerfield. I said, do you know George Sheldon wrote about an 8-foot giant with the skull as big as a peck basket in his town history? And he said, no, but here's his indexed archaeological scrapbook. And I had this, it was my Da Vinci Code moment. I just had this buzz throughout me. I knew what I was going to find. And what I found was skeleton 7 feet long. He had pasted accounts of giant skeletons being found all around the country. yes. And I just thought it was really fascinating. And right here in their Curiosity and Relics book, they had the thigh bone of an at least 8-foot tall skeleton from Ohio on display in Deerfield. I talked to the physical anthropologist who was part of the Native American repatriation team, and they buried all the bones that were on display. At one time, there was Native American bones displayed at many museums, and you can imagine that wasn't well received by Native Americans, and understandably, they asked for them to be reinterred. So right here, I can't call it proof because I'm not going to see the thigh bone, but they talk about the enormity of the thigh bone being on display in their own records. This is another interesting account. Charles Huntington, I spoke to his grandson who says he was had an active mind, he was a great inventor, and he witnessed the unearthing of a 9-foot skeleton when he was 9 or 10 years old. And there were 2 doctors, Cheney and Larkin, who also talked about the skeleton. And eventually it crumbled to dust, like a lot of these accounts, even the Smithsonian, which is a very strange thing. They unearthed them, they oxidized and crumbled to dust. It's not some conspiracy to like cover up the bones. It's in the records of archaeologists. So these ancient remains sometimes crumble to dust. But he was so struck by what he saw, he built this wooden replica that still is in a museum in Cattaraugus County, New York. Now right here is the dimensions. They're listed in Buffalo and at the Smithsonian. 35 inches across the chest, 14-inch foot, and 28-inch shin bone. So that is an enormous person. And the thigh bone, even if it was a 28-inch thigh bone, that's still an over 8-foot person if they mixed up the bones. We're talking about the measurement of the largest bone in the body. And regression formulas were questioned back then. But when you have specifics like this, like many of these accounts give, it makes it more compelling. That's what 9 foot tall looks like. That's Robert Waldo. He had a pituitary condition. But that's what 9 foot tall looks like right there. And you have all these accounts from every manner of historical document. The skull was as large as a half-bushel measure, which is enormous. And they're saying gigantic size, over 9 foot tall. This isn't a mound in Wisconsin. Now, one of the arguments is that these are all hoaxes and mastodon bones and things like that. And I say, no, there's a mystery here. These are all virtually from Native American burial mounds that weren't touched for thousands of years. So these are human remains. Whatever you think of this mystery, they're all human remains for the most part. Right here, the skull is large enough to fit as a helmet over the average man's head. The skeleton was one of several found buried in the form of a whale. Now, this is a very obscure Native American burial technique, like the spokes of a whale. So this isn't a misrepresentation of the facts. This is just a telling of what they found. And you find these weird accounts of the skull goes over the head, the jawbone goes over the face, all around the country, embedded usually obscurely in the works of historians in town and county histories in an era of inefficient communication. Like, if this is some kind of hoax, they're all communicating with each other over decades of time. That doesn't make sense. It really begs it really makes this quite a compelling case. 9 feet tall in Indiana. Once again, 1,000 accounts like this, which is really incredible. This is the Chickasaw Mound. And right here, the Field Museum that has Sue the T-Rex reports this in their records from the Chickasaw Mound in Arkansas. Skeletons are very large and tall. One femur bone unearthed that was 29 inches in length. The skulls are extremely large, the jaws of such size that it would slip over my own and considerable space to spare. Same thing over and over again. Jawbone of the face, 29-inch femur is pushing 9 feet tall. Respected paleoanthropologist W.J. Holland, the curator of anthropology for the Carnegie, reports between an 8 and 9 foot skeleton in Scientific American. This is Miamisburg. This is a really compelling case. So in Miamisburg, they unearth an 8 foot, 1.5 inch skeleton. Scientists from all around the country show up, and they in fact list it in the list of the known largest skeletons ever found in the world. And the head of physical anthropology, Thomas Wilson, says this: the authenticity of the skull is beyond doubt. Its antiquity is unquestionably great. To my own personal knowledge, several such crania were discovered in the Hopewell group of mounds in Ohio. exhibiting monkey-like traits, the jaws of Protagonist projecting beyond the face. So the head of the Smithsonian in 1897 examined this 8-foot, 1.5-inch skeleton. And there's pictures drawn of it. It was on display. I've been looking into this. I cannot find where the remains are, unfortunately. But the greatest minds in the country are looking at this. It's on display. You know, if it's 5'7", you think somebody's going to show up and like, what the hell are you guys thinking? You know, it really, it's just striking how many accounts are like this by the most respected scientists of the time. Gigantic skull poses problem. Nice. I love this. The chipmunk's like, thank you so much. You know, this is a real picture, actually. Yeah. This is really interesting. 1933, Finleyville, Pittsburgh. George S. Fisher, state archaeology, unearths a bunch of skeletons that were very large. This one is 7'5", 26 inches across the chest. So it's in the New York Times. It's you know, the story's catching a lot of buzz. This guy, Donald Cadzow, Oxford-trained archaeologist, is working with Fisher. Months later, they run the story. He's taking the bones to Harrisburg to go to the Smithsonian, and then he's dumping on, what is it? Archaeology director believes, I'm sorry, foreign craze. He's talking about all the archaeologists going to Peru and Machu Picchu and different places and talking about the amazing cultures around Pittsburgh and Ohio and all these areas in the east. But he's cruising, the article says, with a 7'5" skeleton. And this guy is a well-respected archaeologist in the 30s. You know, is he really going to mismeasure or make up a story? So there's a continuity in this story, and I cannot find what happened to the remains, unfortunately. And anthropologists will say, oh, there's no credible, you know, newer reports of these finds. But right here in the Cresap Mound, the head of the section of man, Don Dragoo at the Carnegie, reports a 7'2" skeleton that was found right there in this burial mound. A mining company, I believe, was destroying this, so he went in and he dug and he found a 7'2" skeleton, and that the Adena people, we're not talking about skinny NBA players, like huge and robust with huge skulls and jaws. There's a real mystery to the Adena. Here's a skeleton right here. And the Dover Mound, anthropologist Webb and Snow in 1952, working for the University of Kentucky, unearthed a 7-foot skeleton. And you could say, well, you know, we have 7-footers around today, but there were so many mounds that yielded 7-foot and tall skeletons. And the thought is there's a royal bloodline that was carried from the tall ones to these Native American shamans and rulers. That's what natives will tell us. And it's a really compelling theory. Right here, 1959, several skeletons over 7 foot tall, 7,070 years old. They had red ochre on them. So right here from a reputable museum, over 7 foot tall skeletons. This is 7 foot 2.5 inches. This is from Catalina Island. In the show, we investigated the Steelville Giant. In 1933, some boys were digging for arrowheads, and right in that spot was unearthed an 8-foot skeleton. Members from the University of Missouri put it together, laid it out in the doctor's office. Excuse me, we talked to people in town that had saw it and were relatives of Billy Harmon, who was looking for arrowheads. And we found this in the microfilm. It laid out in the doctor's office. I forget his name right now. And this guy, I don't know why he's got black on his face, Les Eaton, is 6 foot tall. And it was shipped to the Smithsonian in 1933, and that's the last we heard of it. And I'll get into those thoughts about the Smithsonian in a minute. There are many angles to the story, and one is that the great mystics in human history, Edgar Cayce, Rudolf Steiner, Madame Blavatsky, all talked about giant humans, late Pleistocene era humans that existed before the flood. And it's a strange phenomena, but you know, Cayce has these readings that talk about this. There were giants in these days. They took on many sizes, from that may be called the midget to the giants, as big as 10 to 12 feet. Now, Cayce had an 8th grade education, and he would go into a trance state. And he gave 25 million words and 14,000 readings, usually about health-related matters. And he had an astonishing, wealth of knowledge about subjects he should not have known about geology and history. He had 68 readings about the mound builders of ancient America that were very specific, that none of us could cough up, quite frankly. And Cayce his readings are astounding. And just like Native American legends and legends all around the planet, oral histories, they talk about the little people that existed with giants as part of the population of Atlantis. I know it sounds like somebody slipped me some acid, but it's really this compelling story that runs through all the traditions, the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, mystics. I'll show you here. And Casey said that the mounds of the ancient Native American mounds sometimes were representations of the central city of Atlantis. That the Iroquois came to the United States from the sunken continent 12,000 years ago and passed on this knowledge. Now this is in Portsmouth, Ohio, and it looks exactly like the central city of Atlantis that Plato talked about. And archaeologists can never figure out what all the moats and rings are about. And you know, this is a representation of like the city in the middle of Plato's Atlantis. So take what you want from that, but it's a really interesting thing. And even Rudolf Steiner talked about giants, and Madame Blavatsky, the mystic, also did. And right here, Rosicrucian science confirmed. One is a giant nearly 8 feet tall. The bodies will be reassembled at Finleyville and delivered to the State Museum at Harrisburg. That's the account I talked about previously. Some are to be sent to the Smithsonian Institution at Washington. So the Rosicrucians and Freemasons in their literature look at these giant accounts as proof of Atlantis, where they got all their esoteric knowledge from. And the lineage has been carried down for thousands of years through the temple priests in Egypt and, you know, to the modern day. So that's a really interesting turn. Washington was a Freemason, and he was building a fort in 1754 for the Virginia militia. And him and his workers reported unearthing over 7-foot tall skeletons that backed up the accounts of explorer John Smith in 1607, who met the Susquehannocks, who were like 7 feet tall. And here's the bone cave right here. I don't think this video is going to work. Let's see. So we went to the bone cave, my brother and I. And it was crazy. There was a rock fall, so you had to squeeze through this super tight section. And we made it to the point where the last team of explorers was in 1914. And there was torch marks all over the walls. There was 1872 and 1899 carved in there. And I got into this flooded passageway right there. And I couldn't go any, I went another 150 yards. The cameraman couldn't follow me. And it opened up in this cavernous room. But the oxygen was bad. I ended up getting sick for a couple of weeks, and we had to, because of hypothermia concerns and bad air, abort the mission. But the last explorer in there in 1914 reported an enormous petrified giant body in there, and he obviously didn't take it out. So we hope to get back to the bone cave to further explore this. But the ranger at the park told us the same stories of jawbones over the face and massive skulls that were pulled out of this cave, you know, for over 100 years. So, you know, it's a really compelling story. We investigated this too. That's a ruler right there, I believe, with this thigh bone. That's probably 24 inches. But a very well-known writer went across the country, and he ran into the Ozark people that were being pushed out. And he found in a shelter cave that these enormous skeletons were unearthed by this naturalist. So we went there down to Beaver Lake, but it was flooded underwater. So the Army Corps of Engineers flooded it. We found what we believe is the cave and this huge stone wall in front, which was really cool. We dove in there, but we could not find any skeletal evidence, just silt. But we corroborated, you know, what we try to do is show that these stories are real. Whatever you think of the end result or the way that people describe the findings, these are real places and real people. This is one of the most interesting stories about giants in Mexico. This is Byron Cummings, the head of archaeology, the dean of Southwest Archaeology for the University of Arizona. In 1930, he went down to the Sonora region in a burial mound. A miner had dug up 8-foot skeletal remains. And he went there, and the Yaqui Indians were destroyed the skeletons with their rifle butts because they did not want interlopers in their ancient burial grounds. You can imagine why. So he was pissed. He contacted Washington to try to get help at this time. But then it takes another turn where explorer Paxton Hayes goes to Sonora and finds another place called the Lost City of Giants. And here's Hayes right here. We met his son in the show. He has corn that he found at this burial site that I'll show you. So this odyssey went on for 20 years. He was originally founded by Eastern institutions, and once he started to report giant mummified remains, he lost his funding. but he lived with the Yaqui Indians, the fierce, uncontrollable Yaqui Indians, for 7 years, and befriended them, and they took him in and they showed him where the lost city of giants was. And here it is right here, ruins yield mummies of pygmies and giants. This is in a massive 400 square mile area. And his son said he would take us there, but there were like severe travel restrictions at the time when we were filming, and you know, private security and stuff like that. We couldn't put it all together, and we hope to go back there. This is the original press release photo of the City of Giants from 1933 that Paxton Hayes found, and within it he found 33 mummies that were 7.5 feet tall or larger. And right here is one of the mummies in a bundle burial, and they were in baskets, and here's the back of it. This mummy is 7.5 feet tall, and it talks about, you know, tells of a cave 450 miles inland. It's in this massive area south of the border. And here's Hayes here with the giant mummified head in a gourd shell that he found. And right here, Smithsonian amazed at discovery of 6.5 foot mummies in cave. Actually, it was 7.5. He had a dispute, Hayes did, with Roy Chapman Andrews at the Smithsonian, who basically discounted his finds. So there was this big raging debate that went on. And his Carlos, his son, said his father believed he discovered these giants. He showed the evidence, and he was just marginalized, and you know, they tried to just embarrass him essentially. And Hayes in 1950 has a burial robe that he brought to the elders of Tiburon Island that had, it was a purple robe with triangles all over it, and it was a burial robe of one of these giants that he had found. And then a couple of years ago in Sonora, they found 23 skulls. 13 were elongated like this in the same region, which is a really interesting thing. I know Hugh, my co-author, has been all around the world with guys like Brian Forrester, trying to figure out why these separate civilizations all around the planet elongated their skulls. That's such a strange and extreme thing. Like, you know, are you going to do that to your kid? You know, like, why is this happening? Are they emulating something? There are skulls like this all around the world. It's a really interesting thing. So there's a big question everybody's asking: is there some form of conspiracy? Now, I will say that, you know, this whole thing, archaeological and anthropological mysteries are like religion and politics. You have the true believers, and then you have the hardened skeptics. And I see fault on both sides. I see a lot of hucksters and snake oilers out there, a lot of garbage. We investigate stories and they have no validity. But then I see entrenched academics who don't look at real mystery, like I will get to in a little while. Like the hobbits were found in Florensis, Indonesia, a couple of years ago. These 3-foot tall hominids that lived from 100,000 years to 12,000 years ago. We have ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe that are 12,000 years old. And there's not a real honest look at it because there's so much garbage out there, like on the internet, that the skeptic will dismiss it all. And then the true believer will believe in the secret base on the moon, or chemtrails, or phony lunar landings. So you have this real, once again, it reminds me of religion and politics. And I'm trying to meet in the middle. I work with professionals. I am open-minded to, you know, read the accounts of mystics and talk to Native Americans and other indigenous people about their oral traditions. So the conclusion I found is the Smithsonian never addressed the fact that in their own records, they found, their scientists reported 17 7-foot and taller skeletons, which is an enormous amount in the burial mounds. And they just really didn't address it and left it, you know, this mythology out there, like they're hiding skeletons, which I don't think is the case. I just think it's academic ignorance. And, you know, one of the problems is we all know there's real conspiracies out there. There is corruption and endless wars, and people want a different version of life that's going on, you know, that instead of what's going on the planet. So you're compelled to believe something maybe that might not be true. And I'm just trying to, once again, meet in the middle and look at this objectively. So there was a group of hardcore racists and eugenists that were running the Smithsonian at the time, where a lot of these were found, skeletons were found. Dr. Hrdlička right here is one of them. He's the guy who claims that giants are no more in the 30s. And he's saying it's basically the will to believe that's causing all these reports to surface. And there's many accounts of the Smithsonian, you know, receiving these remains. In their own ethnology reports, they have things like this from 1873. One skull was found that measured 36 inches in circumference. That is absolutely enormous. And these skulls, Perrin writes, that crumbled to dust, and there were a bunch of them in an Illinois mound. And this is a trained scientist measuring a 36-inch skull, which is astounding. And right here, Colonel Norris reports, it's in the New York Times and the Smithsonian literature, a 7'8" skeleton. And then they find a giant axe later on. And these two respected, one's a physician and one's a lawyer, are talking back and forth in the West Virginia Journal about, was this giant axe from this giant that they found, 7'8" in West Virginia, in the Smithsonian's records. Another interesting twist, right there, I have a 30-pound stone axe from Illinois that I brought. This right here was believed the largest found in the world, 33-pound, 10-ounce axe. You find many accounts that have giant skeletons reported with giant implements all around the world. It's such a strange thing, you know. Why are you making these unwieldable items? And you find it everywhere, 41, 32-pound copper axes. Huge axe indicates giant Indians once roamed to Virginia. This is from South Africa several years ago. At the lowest level of a basin, they found 10,000 normal-sized artifacts, and the Oxford scientists found these enormous hand axes that were made, which begs the question, who the hell is wielding them? From the Smithsonian report, this skeleton was purported to be well over 7 feet. This is from a North Carolina burial mound. They removed the earth and they found these beehive, cone-shaped stone structures. Once again, thighs and skull sent to the Smithsonian, jawbone over the face, 8 foot tall. This is another interesting report done in 1939. This skull was found almost twice the normal size in a burial mound in Texas. This is the Morehouse Mound. Now, Duffin was the archaeologist. I tried to get in touch with him. He was 105 and just passed away a year or two ago in Arizona. But this find was looked at by a physical anthropologist that said that there was no disease condition associated with this giant skull. And it was at the Texas Archaeological Research Lab. I contacted them, and they no longer have the skull, which sucks, because look at how enormous it is. And the curator said we had thousands and thousands of artifacts. I don't think they just, you know, it just fell through the cracks. But you find these reports everywhere in respected literature, like this one, the Giant of Castelnau. Now, this was found in France in the 1890s at the lowest level of a burial mound in France. And there are 3 different bones, or 4 different bones. One is a femoral midshaft, and they correspond with an 11'6" giant, if you can believe that. And this was a peer-reviewed case looked at by dozens of anthropologists at the time. And this is basically what it indicates. And they also found a 6'10" adolescent in this burial mound too. So this guy was a piece of work. Lapinge, he was a hardcore anti-Semitic, you know, POS. But anyways, atheistic, Darwinian, socialistic, anti-Semitic eugenist views make his discovery of the giant bones all the more noteworthy. His calculations indicated the Neolithic giant was about 3.5 meters tall, several hundred kilograms weight, so 11'6". This is a respected, well, his scientific ability was respected, not his attitudes. So those bones we're still searching for. They were at the University of Montpellier, I believe, and we still cannot find them because Lapinge was canned because of his anti-Semitic views, so he might have taken them to the grave. But all around France and Europe, you find the same things. Like these were sent to the Paris Academy, 28, 31, 32-inch skulls in human burial mounds. Once again, absolutely enormous. And Nazi prisoners who dug up the bones of giants in 1945 in Paris. Really interesting stories here. The same thing, right? 8'7" in a sarcophagus formed of flat stones. Now, all these European ones are usually found in stone sarcophagus, unlike the U.S. finds. So Cecilia Hall, our friend, put together a map of these 1,000 accounts that were found in the U.S. In the Ohio River Valley, the realm of the mound builders, you find most of them right there. These are all 7 foot and taller. Obviously, some are hoaxes or misidentifications, but that is such an enormous amount. In Europe, you have the same thing, and Hugh has investigated many of those accounts in Europe. And you have giant accounts associated with these massive megalithic sites. This is Baalbek, And these three stones are 900 tons a piece, up like 30 feet in the air. And you can't get a razor blade between these. It's a really astonishing sight. And then in Monumental, you have legends of giants. This is in Pohnpei in Micronesia. So right here in the American Geographical Society, Captain Coffey goes to Monumental, and this is what he finds. Gigantic bones in these ancient sites over and over again. Even Stonehenge has numerous 7-foot and taller accounts in the burial mound, sometimes 9 foot tall, if you can believe it. We think this is funny, I don't know why. So the early explorers also encountered giants, giant native people. All the great explorers you can name talk about it. Giant Native American Tuscaloosa who ruled the Alabama region. Him and his son were 7.5 and 8 foot tall. And they talk about on their knees, he was, taller than all our men and we couldn't reach his chest and all that. They're specifically talking about giant people they encountered. This is a weird codex that's in the Vatican. I don't know what these guys are doing, but this is in like the 1500s and they're killing this giant. I just threw that in because it's interesting. In the Bible, I'm not a Bible literalist, I'm a recovering Catholic, but there are many reports specifically about Moses sending out scouts and things like this. The giant of Gath had 6 fingers and 6 toes, which is very interesting. And then you find accounts like this in Thomas Henry Buckles, like this giant, have 6 fingers on their hands and 6 feet on their toes. All around the world at petroglyph sites, this is in Utah, a giant foot with 6 toes. You find it at Chaco Canyon, all in the southwest, even the east, right here, nice feet. 6 fingers on this being. And you got to ask yourself, is it just revered because it's an anatomic anomaly, or is this a remembrance of giant people who lived in the past? This is very strange. This is Michael Tellinger. Hugh's been here in South Africa. This has 6 toes, actually. I don't believe a giant stepped in the mud 200 million years ago, but maybe the native people carved this for a particular reason. It's enormous, and it had 6 toes in it, just like this cat, right? This is going to be a giant when it grows up. Once again, Chaco Canyon. They found a foot in Pueblo Bonito that had 6 toes on it, a skeletal foot. There are many interesting anthropological mysteries that are occurring right now. There's new finds. There's the Denisovans and Neanderthal interbreeding. And this is particularly interesting because they found these 3-foot hominids in Indonesia about 10 years ago. And they don't know what to classify them. There's this raging battle. But basically, 3-foot high hominids existed from 100,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago. And the Indonesian people have a legend about the Ibu Gogo, the little people. Just like Native Americans and all indigenous people have legends of these little people, which sounds crazy, but I've talked to so many Native Americans who talk about that. And now we have anthropological proof. And they died out 12,000 years ago, the time when it is believed that the ancient flood and cataclysm took place around the planet. Now, I don't want to get tangential, but all around the planet there is geological evidence. And now the Younger Dryas cometary impact theory is gaining traction too. There is a lot of evidence that there was a cataclysm, not as the Bible says, whatever, 3,000 years ago, but 12,000 years ago. And that's when they died out, which is very interesting. The late Pleistocene era was a freak show of giant beavers and crazy creatures that had lived for so long, and then it was all wiped out. The mammoths and the mastodons were not hunted out of extinction. They were destroyed in a cataclysmic event. And even around here, the Native Americans talk about going to Mount Washington to avoid the massive flood that ripped through the earth. And it really looks like the catastrophism happened, not just uniformitarianism, that there was a cataclysmic flood. The geological evidence is mounting for that. This is very interesting. Heidelbergensis in 1909, they found an ancient hominid that existed, but there's a branch in South Africa. And Professor Lieberger keeps finding bones that indicate men or a species over 7 foot tall. But this is a bad picture, but this is twice the size of a normal femur, twice the girth. And there's a raging debate whether it is robustness or incredible height. And Professor Thackeray in South Africa said that this may indicate a man that's twice the normal size. And interestingly, in Siberia, they have just found a couple of years ago the Denisovans, a new species that interbred with humans and Neanderthals 40,000 years ago. Now, Denisovans have been found to go back 100,000 years. The only evidence is a small piece of a finger bone and 2 teeth, and the teeth were so large they thought it was a cave bear's tooth. And they took it to the Max Planck Institute and found it was a new species that interbred with humans. So maybe this is, where these giant humans we're talking about came from. Science will give us our answers, but that, is really compelling. If you have a tooth that big, you have a jaw that's enormous, maybe there is an anthropological link that we're looking for. And what I was talking about before was this is one of the most compelling sites on the planet. And Hugh and his friends, other researchers, probably have been here and researched it more than anybody except the archaeological team from Germany who looked at it. And what you have is this massive megalithic complex that is 12,000 years old, that has doubled the age of civilization found in Turkey. And they've been excavating it, and what they found is the oldest enclosures are the most sophisticated. So you have hunter-gatherer people who existed for thousands of years, and one day, 12,000 years ago, they figured, let's create agriculture, which they did, and create these massive megalithic monuments. Now the theory alternatively is that survivors from the flood came around the world to repromulgate civilization. You find it in Egypt, you find it in South America. They're the bearded gods, the Veracoches of the world. And you have this site that really seems to strengthen the argument, built at the time right after Plato's Atlantis, 9,600 years ago. At the site, you have these sophisticated carvings. It's absolutely enormous. They used it for 1,000 years and then buried it. So there's no doubt that it's 12,000 years old, and it might even be 14,000 years old. They're digging still there. And you just have these wonderful, incredible structures. These pillars are enormous, and you have the similar iconography, like the fingers coming around the waist, found at different sites like Easter Island and Sulawesi in Indonesia. All these sites that have no connection or shouldn't have any connection are expressing the same iconography. It's really compelling. Now, if you're into alternative subjects, you wonder, who can I trust? Who's going to snake oil me? Who's going to, not be objective? Who's committed to not admitting they're wrong? And this guy right here, Graham Hancock, if you haven't read his new book, Magicians of the Gods, I would recommend it. He really lays out the strong case for a pre-Ice Age advanced civilization. He's at Göbekli Tepe here, and this is a 50-ton stone that was left at the quarry over 12,000 years ago. So this would be considered absolutely obscene to an archaeologist 15, 20 years ago. Like, you're out of your mind. But now we have proof that there was this high level of sophistication long ago. This is my boy Mencken. The aim of public education is not to spread enlightenment at all. It is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same self-level, to breed a standard citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. I think we can all feel that in society, and I'm just advocating to be, be an open-minded thinker about these things and realize there are real forces who want conformity. They want you dumb, and it doesn't have to be a boardroom of idiots with cigars. It just is the way it is. And our society is dehumanizing. People are involved in jobs that they have no passion for. And I would recommend just really trying to think openly about these things. Think for yourself and look at both sides of an argument, and don't be afraid to be wrong and to make mistakes. I was just down in Ecuador doing an ayahuasca San Pedro retreat, which is plant medicines with shamans from South America. So I had a multi-dimensional experience, and what I learned and what I could see and what I already knew was the holographic nature of reality that many native people talk about. And it's quite a thing to see what reality is behind the veil. And I try to incorporate this into the research I do to give a holistic perspective on things, that it's an interconnected web. It's a global mind, if you will. So to kind of retreat and be individualistic and in confrontations all the time is the wrong approach, To kind of forgive the dream is the way to go. And there's a lot of wisdom that has been passed down to us by Native Americans. This is Linus the cat pretending to be a stuffed animal. And that is it.